Hey everyone! Now, I don't know if you knew this about me, but I kind of like Death Battle. I mean, I've been watching it for around a decade now, and I've met basically all of my closest friends thanks to it. So yeah, you could say I care a lot about this silly little web series. And just like every other person who's ever watched a Death Battle episode, I have quite a few matchups and characters I'd love to see the show cover. So I'm going to spend the next while going over some of those ideas and why I'm partial to them. In video form! I was inspired to make this by watching videos from some of my friends who make similar Death Battle content on YouTube, namely Galaxy Video Max's own top 10s and Biff Weed's season rankings. Go check their stuff out if you haven't, because they are a lot better at these kinds of videos than I am since they've been making them for years already. But hey, if you stick with me to the end and like what you see, I appreciate you. I actually want to try and make video reviews for every episode of Death Battle's Season 10 as they come out, so feel free to stick with me down the line as I try my hand at those. For now though, let's get on with the topic at hand. Here are 10 of my favorite Death Battle matchups that I would want to see done on the show in no particular order. Let's get it going.
Can the Spider-Man come out to play?
The Joker from DC Comics versus the Green Goblin from Marvel. Any casual viewer of Death Battle will be able to tell you that Marvel vs. DC episodes are hard to escape in an average season. There's been at least one of them in every season of the show so far, and they can range from excellent showings to some of the show's least noteworthy entries. Personally, I prefer when Marvel and DC characters are paired against franchises other than each other, since those episodes are usually more creative and can bring in fresh faces from previously unused properties, which is always nice. However, there's one Marvel vs. DC match left that I would be fully on board with seeing on Death Battle, and that's bringing the Joker back to cap off the Batman vs. Spider-Man episodes by having him fight the Green Goblin. Two insanely maniacal recurring villains who are both extremely manipulative lords of crime and are obsessed with Bats and Spidey respectively. For as many times as Batman has been dragged back onto the show, it's frankly bizarre to me that Joker has been relegated to a single episode in Season 3 that was pretty good, but not amazing. Joker vs. Sweet Tooth is a fun time with some cool moments, and it's spawned its fair share of brain-rotting inside jokes with my friends, but I felt like Joker didn't get to do a lot of the things that set him apart as a character. Biff mentioned this in his Season 3 ranking, but Joker and Sweet Tooth's arsenals and approaches to combat just don't mesh that well, leaving the fight mostly on Sweet Tooth's turf right up until the ending. But against Green Goblin, we could get to see Joker's full array of bizarre gadgets and more of his actual combat aptitude. His gleeful brutality in melee combat wasn't something we got to see much against Needles, and I think there's a lot of potential for that here, whether he wins or loses. By the way, do not play a drinking game where you take a shot every time I say potential in this video. You will die, and I don't need that on my conscience. As for Osborn, he's got plenty of fresh stuff that he would bring to the table, both for the fight and for the analysis. Some of the shit he does to Peter across the main Marvel canon alone approaches Reverse Flash levels of petty and twisted, and it would be hilarious to hear Wiz and Boomstick cover him for that reason alone. But the main draw of this match for me would be watching their insanity bounce off one another in the animation. Imagine a fight with the high-octane insanity of Harley vs. Jinx paired with brutality and gore on par with a Mortal Kombat episode. Just try telling me that wouldn't be a fun watch, I dare you. In terms of who would win, I think it's a fairly easy win for Green Goblin. From scaling to Spidey, he'd be too strong for Joker and too fast for him to use the Joker Venom effectively, especially on his glider. And even then, he's got plenty of experience dealing with his own Goblin formula, which can be used identically to the Joker Venom, so he'd know to keep away from that shit. Either way, this is literally the only Marvel vs. DC match I would actively be excited for at this point in Death Battle's history, and if handled well, I think it could place near the top of this subcategory's long, troubled history.
Okay, so let me get this straight. I'm
On the Disney Channel.
And Boon Choi from Amphibia vs. Luz Noceda from the Owl House. I don't have a ton to say about this matchup that you haven't probably heard elsewhere. It's basically Disney's two isekai girls throwing down, which would be fun to watch both for the animation and for seeing Amphibia and the Owl House get analyzed. Seeing the two series get treated with more respect by Death Battle than by Disney would be fucking hysterical. When I was picking entries for this list, I tried to weed out episodes that I wanted mainly just because they're popular among fans. Matchups with community status like Fall Guys vs. Among Us are great, and I would love to see them happen, but I don't usually have a lot of personal stock in them. This one is different because I fucking adore the Owl House, and while I've only watched the first episode of Amphibia, it seemed fun and charming, and I plan to watch the rest of it sometime. This episode feels like it would be picking up right where Steven vs. Star left off, bringing in even more modern cartoons to Death Battle with a match that's both thematic and fun as hell. Between those custom sprites that Origin made and the custom track Brandon Yates put together for this match, I almost feel like it's just waiting to be put into motion as an official episode at this point. I can picture the fight starting with Anne struggling to keep up with Luz and her glyphs, then evening the playing field as she goes Calamity mode and things get more intense. Things would obviously end with Calamity Anne clashing with Titan Luz, though I don't actually know who would win this. I haven't seen the Owl House finale yet, so I don't know what buffs Luz got from that, and I only really know about the moon shenanigans for Amphibia feats. I really hope they do this one soon, it just feels too perfect to pass up.
I've heard of Armed and Dangerous, but this is ridiculous!
Cuphead from, well, Cuphead versus Peacock from Skullgirls. Two characters meant to pay tribute to the golden era of rubber hose animation throw down in a high-class bout for the ages. I know plenty of people would say Bendy is more thematic for a Cuphead opponent in that regard, but come on, do you really need them to top the DBX with a rerun? I'm sure they could, but in the context of a researched fight, I just think changing it up with Peacock makes more sense. This is a match I've actually researched and written a fight for twice in the past. Once for Courtroom Conflict, and again for Crossover X, so it's a matchup that I have a lot of history with. Considering that, I would love to see what the Death Battle team could do with it, since I think it has a ton of potential. Cuphead and Skullgirls are two series that would be new to the show, and with how different they are from most other series, watching their analyses would be radically new and fun. Just keep the horny boomstick jokes far, far away from the Skullgirls cast, or I will be forced to violate the Geneva Convention. You can delve into supplementary material like the comics and the cartoon for Cuphead, while also touching on the mobile game and the webtoon for Peacock. The animation would be a lot of fun as well. Cuphead's brashness and Peacock's playful nature would play off each other very well, and the fight would likely consist of Cuphead trying to weather the storm of Peacock's gang and her projectiles while firing off his own shots. It'd almost be like a regular Cuphead boss in that way, which is a dynamic of the fight you could play up masterfully. I also think the soundtrack for this fight would be a guaranteed banger. Cuphead's soundtrack is a masterwork in itself, we all know that already. However, the Skullgirls soundtrack isn't one to be slept on either, and motifs of some stages related to Peacock could be worked in alongside the usual big band style of Cuphead's music. Get it? Big band? It could also start light and goofy while ramping up to something more insane and frantic once the fight gets serious. Speaking of the fight, I think Peacock is fairly set up to take the win here, which I've basically always thought to be the case for this match. The attack power argument can go either way depending on how you view some of Cuphead's bosses, but Peacock is generally faster with her laser attacks and has way more versatility with her reality warping powers. And that's not even mentioning what would happen when she, a fighting game character, gets in melee range against Cuphead, whose only physical attack is the beach-ass whetstone parry. Cuphead can't even reliably put distance between him and her, since she can just teleport behind him with her eye portals. Verdict aside though, this match would just be an absolute romp from analysis to conclusion. I've always believed in its potential as an episode regardless of the show it's on, and with the production quality of Death Battle behind it, I really believe it could be something special. Whoever said the Bendy DBX had to be the best Cuphead would get on the channel anyway?
It's not a door. It's a thing of evil.
Vaxel Dan from Critical Role versus Makoto Yuki from Persona 3. Here we have two standoffish loners who present as indifferent to the world and people around them, only to grow closer to their team of allies as they fight through thick and thin. And when they are bestowed strange powers through a connection to an entity of death, they ultimately sacrifice themselves in the end so the people they care about can live on, watching over them from afar. I've been seeing a lot more ideas for Critical Role matchups floating around ever since The Legend of Vox Machina started airing. Percy seems to be the favorite to appear on the show first from Campaign 1's cast of player characters, and I would be so down to see him on an episode. I actually thought of him versus Arya Stark from A Song of Ice and Fire, but I've since come up with this Critical Role matchup, which I like a lot more than that one. From the moment he becomes the champion of the Raven Queen, Vax becomes an integral part of the story of Vox Machina, as well as that of Exandria as a whole. Not only would that make him an ideal candidate to analyze the universe of Critical Role and the infinite multiverse of Dungeons & Dragons, but it also makes him a formidable fighter, especially when he ascends to become the champion of Ravens. There's a lot you could do with Vax on Death Battle, from his roguish skills to his paladin traits, and even his powers as the Raven Queen's champion. As for Makoto's angle, he seems to appear far less often in suggestions compared to Yu and Joker. Sure, Persona 3 was already on the show with Mitsuru, but her relation to the Dark Hour and the overarching story of the game pales in comparison to what you can delve into with Makoto, considering his ties to Ryoji and Nyx. so his rundown wouldn't be too much of a repeat of Mitsuru's. It'll also give Ben a much needed chance to actually pronounce the names of Persona characters correctly, so that's good. Now, I recognize that it's unlikely that Makoto will be the wildcard user that gets on the show first, never mind as a part of this matchup. Joker's far more likely to appear against Giorno before him, and while I don't mind Joker vs. Giorno as a match, I don't care about Giorno that much, so it's a match I'd only be half excited for. Meanwhile, there are other Persona matchups I would be wholly hyped about, with this one ranking near the top. This would make for a kick-ass fight too. I imagine the best way to set it up is that Vax, as the champion of the Raven Queen, appears before Makoto to ferry his soul to the afterlife, but since Makoto is still acting as the Great Seal on Nyx, he obviously resists being removed. Seeing Vax square off against Thanatos, as well as Makoto's other personas, in front of the Great Seal would be a raw as hell scene for a fight animation. I'd also love to see this become a real episode because I have absolutely no idea who should win. Vox Machina beating Vecna could potentially stack up to the Persona universe's more insane cosmic feats, so there's the potential for an interesting debate to be had as to who the victor would be. I'm like the only person who knows this idea exists, so I doubt it'll ever happen, but that doesn't matter for the purposes of this list. I just have to like the idea, and in the case of Vax vs Makoto, I definitely do. Oh, and by the way, Liam O'Brien should definitely be asked to voice Vax for the fight. I have no doubt he'd jump on the chance to do so.
Die, 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 die.
Guts from Berserk versus Dimitri from Fire Emblem. Two warriors from medieval times who are constantly haunted by the ghosts of their traumatic pasts, and who will stop at nothing to tear down anyone who gets in their way. Guts is pretty high on the list of characters who could greatly benefit from a run back on Death Battle. Not only do I know the team would be down to revisit him, but his fight against Nightmare left a lot to be desired in terms of the research and verdict. And on the flip side, we haven't had Fire Emblem on the show at all yet, so this is a perfect opportunity to let these two berserkers shine. As far as Guts goes, his analysis can mostly just get the modern Death Battle tune-up. More concrete feats and stats, while also focusing on delving into the complexity of his character, rather than just painting him as a senseless slayer. I haven't read Berserk, but from what my friends who love the series tell me, the way Guts has been painted by shows like Death Battle and Battle Royale erases a lot of the material that makes Guts compelling. This would be a great chance to bring that part of him to the forefront, especially since it parallels nicely with Dimitri. Speaking of the gold-haired boar, Dimitri's analysis can do a lot of the same character introspection Guts would have, while also serving as a nice introduction to the world of Fire Emblem for fans of Death Battle who haven't played it before. You can focus on the contemporary story of Three Houses for him, and delve deeper into the lore of Fodlan when talking about crests and the hero's relics. It could be funny to see Boomstick go on a rant against the church when discussing how insane Rhea is for one of the cutaway gags, especially since we know he's had dealings with devils from previous episodes. As for the animation, you obviously don't need a ton of setup to make Guts and post-timeskip Dimitri fight, but I think there's room for creativity here. Maybe Guts is leading his mercenary group through the woods and they happen upon Gronder Field, where they stumble into the battle between the Adrestian Empire, the Kingdom of Fargus, and the Leicester Alliance. They get dragged into it, and Guts and Dimitri face off as leaders of their respective groups. From there, it's basically Saberwolf versus John Talbane with how gory the fight gets, with Guts and Dimitri both losing themselves before they scramble to land the killing blow first. It's really no surprise that Dimitri should end up winning. Most stuff in Three Houses is far above anything Guts scales to. Regardless though, this would be a brutally fun match to see happen, and I hope we get to see it sometime in the future.
The wave's beginning, so play the game. We're happy, stay in your lane, and listen because this neighbor ain't spitting peace.
The plants from Plants vs. Zombies versus the monkeys from Bloons. This is probably the dumbest match on this list by a landslide, but I just love the idea of it. Two massive armies of unconventional heroes facing off against a relentless threat, saving the day with a ceaseless hailstorm of projectiles. This match actually goes a lot deeper than you might think at a first glance. Both the plants and the monkeys have a lot of varied powers on their sides, and in a full-on army versus army scenario, there would be a ton of factors in play that would make this super fun to debate and research. I'm not doing all of that research just to talk about it here, mind you. I'm just going to give a small snippet of what we could witness if this fight became a reality. The plants tend to focus more on controlling the battlefield and managing the pace of an oncoming horde. They can erect defenses with walnuts and set traps with plants like spikeweeds and grimroses, while also messing with their enemies' means of offense and defense by hypnotizing them, magnetizing their metallic weapons, and even outright rewinding time, insert funny joke here.
It's hero time!
They can also manipulate fire, ice, lightning, and even concentrated sunlight to mix up their attacking options. The monkeys, meanwhile, actually have a lot of similar skills. Their fighting style tends more toward an overwhelming offensive darts, fire, magic, and whatever else they can get their hands on. They're also good at strengthening their power with the buffing abilities some towers in the monkeys' ranks possess. They boast all kinds of unique abilities, ranging from plant manipulation to necromancy, and they can see ghosts, blast massive balloons out of the sky, and use a variety of fire, ice, glue, darts, explosives, and concentrated sunbeams as well. When it comes to the sheer variety of types of units to use, the plants definitely have that thanks to the insane number of plant species you can use in Plants vs. Zombies. Mainly through the use of microtransactions, thanks EA. This would probably come down to Super Monkey and the Druids versus the strongest that the plants have to offer. So the question is this: can the plants' stalwart defenses outlast the monkeys' relentless offense? I picture something akin to the Goomba vs. Waddle Dee 1-minute melee in terms of the scope of the battle, just with a lot more projectiles flying from both sides. And you just know the score would be a bop, since both PvZ and Bloons have fun tracks that could lend themselves to a cartoony war. This is never gonna happen on Death Battle, but hey, maybe I can at least get a Galaxy Grudge match where the plants fight the Bloons and the monkeys fight the zombies. Certainly.
Love really makes a guy come out of his shell.
Bowser from Super Mario versus Eggman from Sonic the Hedgehog, or Ice King from Adventure Time. Okay, so I'm gonna cheat a little bit with this one. Bowser is one of my favorite villains ever, and so I think you can understand why Bowser vs. Ganon is one of my least favorite Death Battle episodes of the whole bunch. It completely disregards the best stuff Bowser can do and feeds him to le awesome holy weapons NLF. And for what? A slow, uninteresting fight that only has a few elements of quality to it? It has Olympus Mons, that's the most I can say as compliments for it. That's why Bowser is my top pick for characters who need a second appearance on Death Battle. And out of as many potential matches, there are two I would equally like to see, so I'm going to talk about both of them in one slot, because why not? First is against Dr. Eggman from Sonic, for obvious reasons. Eggman is also long overdue for a modern death battle, and there's endless potential for what you can do to pit the Koopa King against the ruler of the Eggman army. The fight would be great, the analyses can pick up on what their older episodes lacked, and of course the music would bang. It's the villainous reflection of one of the series' most iconic matches. You really can't go wrong with this one. The second match I would say suits Bowser's hypothetical second run is one I don't see talked about nearly as often: Ice King from Adventure Time. It's a fire and ice battle that pits two iconic kings who have a bad princess snatching habit against each other. This is both a thematic match and a surprisingly even one, seeing as Ice King's crown can reach similar planetary levels of power that Bowser can. It would also be fun to play Bowser's confident demeanor against the Ice King's humorous bravado, since the goofy side of Bowser was one that was kind of disregarded in his first episode. Justly so, since it would have contrasted against Ganon's more serious characterization, but it would be great to bring it back with the writing of a modern death battle. But yeah, regardless of whatever match they decide to go with for Bowser, I just want to see him return for his much-needed run back. And along with him finally being done justice, we can give Sonic's nemesis his own refreshing appearance, or give people the Adventure Time representation they clearly want in the wake of Finn and Jake versus Mordecai and Rigby going so far in the Champions ballot. It's a win-win either way.
Adachi. Adachi! Adachi!
Yoshikage Kira from JoJo's Bizarre Adventure versus Toru Adachi from Persona 4. Two seemingly mundane small-town serial killers who use their connection to supernatural phenomena to leave no evidence of their crimes. And they're both from the fourth installments of their franchises too. It's like it was planned or something. So yeah, remember when I said there are many Persona matchups I would like to see before Joker vs. Giorno? This is it, kiddo. This is the JoJo vs. Persona match I want to see. Who needs reality-breaking convoluted bullshit when you have funny Duwang Man and Adachi Baby on the scene? As a casual consumer of JoJo media, I would be so much more stoked for Kira than another rep like Giorno or Jolene. He's just iconic, and I'd love to watch his calm smugness slowly devolve into unhinged anger over the course of the animation. Killer Queen would also be fun to see analyzed, since it's one of the more busted stands that will have appeared on Death Battle if this episode were to happen. Will they read his bomb transmutation as insta-win hacks, or will someone with higher durability be able to shrug it off? There's a lot of intricacies to delve into there. And as for Adachi, I mean, come on, it's Adachi, the silliest of guys. How can you not want him to show up to fight Kira? He would be an absolute blast to see in a fight on the show, and his analysis would ideally be loaded with jabs at how pathetic he is, while also recognizing how iconic of a villain he is in the Persona series. Also, Magatsu Izanagi is just cool as shit. The animation for this fight would also be a standout just for how entertaining it would be to have Kira and Adachi bounce off each other. One puts on a calm front and wants to be left in peace, the other is bored of all the world's shit and just wants some fun. Adachi could berate and taunt Kira over the course of their fight until Kira eventually snaps and finally starts to fight with everything he has, a build-up set to what would surely be a fun score, with elements of Kira's theme and Adachi's themes from his P4 boss fight and his arena theme. I haven't even talked about the fact that this would, hypothetically, be Death Battle's very first JoJo vs Persona match. Across the JoJo episodes we've gotten, stands have been portrayed as invincible to those who don't have stands of their own. So imagine the general audience's reaction when that notion gets turned on its head, because personas are similar enough to stands where they could reasonably damage them. It would just be perfect. This match is too good to not happen. It has everything I could want in a death battle. Cool research dynamics, clashing power sets, and the potential for cool as hell interactions between the fighters. What more can I say? It's Kira vs Adachi, you know exactly why it's great. And it's for all those reasons that I really hope it becomes an episode one day.
I thought I told you to come down to dinner!
The Beast from Beauty and the Beast versus Frankenstein's monster from Frankenstein or the modern Prometheus. Two abominable creatures spurned by the judgmental hearts of man, the kindness in their hearts doused and killed by the coldness of the world around them. I wrote an entire fight about this match a few years ago, but I still absolutely adore the idea and would love to see it get the Death Battle treatment, if only for my own satisfaction. With Death Battle tapping into mythological characters in recent seasons for the banger episode that was Hercules vs. Wukong, I think it's about time we got a character from classic literature, and Frankenstein's monster is the perfect fit. How much more iconic can you get than the very first iteration of the hulking artificial man? He's been adapted across countless media and is recognizable to anyone who's ever glanced at their local Spirit Halloween, and he's actually more combat applicable than you might assume. I'll just direct you to my Versus bio on him for that though, since I've already been going on for quite a while. As for the Beast, he fulfills that niche of classic Disney films that hasn't really been explored on a proper Death Battle episode yet. Sure, the crew has tossed around ideas like the Disney Princess Royale before, but I think the Beast suits a versus analysis more than some of the princesses, who you have to concede non-standard weaponry to in order to give them a fighting chance. And this match in particular has so much potential for the animation. I'm honestly not sure how much justice I can do this fight's potential with just words. Not to toot my own horn too much, but I think I killed it with my written fight between these two, so I recommend checking that out if this idea has resonated with you at all. Two tragic monsters beating each other down in the dark depths of an abandoned castle, unleashing the years of solitude and abuse they've lived through in a confrontation that was fated to be fatal from the onset. The rain pouring around them as a raging storm sets the stage for their fury. It would just be a dramatic and gothic tour de force that few other matchups could ever hope to achieve. And depending on how far they go with the monster's body horror, this could rival their goriest episodes when fully realized. Honestly, I could gush about this matchup for ages. It has not gotten any less excellent in my mind since I finished writing my version of it over 3 years ago. Holy fuck. And I will not back down from saying that it would be one of my favorite death battles ever made. And yet, there's still one more to go.
Take your time, puppy, well, there's darkness in the air. Dream, 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 dream.
Darkrai from Pokemon vs. Antasma from Super Mario. Nintendo's Kings of Nightmares from two of the biggest gaming franchises ever come to blows in what would be my most wanted episode of Death Battle, period. It really wasn't even hard to decide what was taking the top spot here. The Beast vs. Frankenstein's monster would satisfy my inner literature nerd, but Darkrai vs. Antasma speaks to my childhood in a way very few other matchups can. Pokemon was my first ever video game series, and I played the hell out of the earlier Mystery Dungeon titles back then. I also adore the Mario and Luigi RPGs, seeing as Bowser's Inside Story is one of my favorite video games of all time, with Dream Team also being a joy to experience. So of course pitting these nightmarish juggernauts against one another is a shoo-in for my most wanted versus match of them all. I talked at length about what sets this match apart in my submission for it in the Death Battle Champions ballot, so if you've already heard about it on Ballot Banter, a lot of this is going to sound familiar. Death Battle hasn't really had a top-tier Pokemon in terms of power on the show yet, at least not in an episode that isn't actively trying to be bad. But even then, Darkrai is in another league compared to Mewtwo, seeing as how it matched Dialga and Palkia in its movie.
No, it just has to star in its own movie.
You're goddamn right. This presents a unique opportunity for Death Battle, since they can delve into the cosmology of the Pokemon multiverse and discuss its strongest beings in ways they haven't had the chance to yet. Plus, when you incorporate material like the movie and Mystery Dungeon, Darkrai is actually much more of a character than, say, a common Pikachu or Machamp, so you can portray it as such without some of the scripting pitfalls that analyzing a general Pokemon species can bring. As for Phantasma, this is another opportunity for Death Battle to expand its coverage of a previously analyzed world. Not only does Phantasma have more of a concrete backstory than most other Mario characters, but his connection to the dream world and how dreams function like their own universes in the Mario games can set his rundown apart even further. It'd be nice to get a Mario analysis that's not just focused on disconnected and miscellaneous adventures in the Mushroom Kingdom for a change. And all of that's not even touching the fight, which would be a new sort of fight for Death Battle just based on the characters in play. Darkrai and Phantasma could tumble through the dream world as they fight, allowing for infinite creativity in set pieces, environmental interactions, and choreography. Phantasma has plenty of dreamy powers and some tools you can pull from his appearances in Dream Team, but Darkrai especially can pull from several sources for its fighting techniques. This includes its Pokken Phantoms, its petrification from the manga, and of course, its huge move pool offering its veritable versatility. There's a ton of ways their powers can interact, like Darkrai using Embargo to negate Phantasma's Munchies, or Phantasma's clones matching Darkrai's use of Phantoms and Double Team. The music for this fight has a ton of possibilities as well. I think a spooky vibe like what Creep Squad from 1 Minute Melee has would fit best, but you can pack it full of musical allusions to Pokemon's legendary battle themes and tracks from Dream Team such as Final Phantasma Battle and Adventure's End. There's all the room in the world for it to slap like a flaming semi-truck to the face. God, I love this match. Personally, I think it's a Darkrai W, but I'd be happy with either of them winning if this episode happened at all. It'd be two of my favorite entities from my favorite game franchises on one of my favorite internet shows. Literally, what more could I ask for? And there you have it. Those are 10 of my most wanted Death Battle episodes in no particular order. I feel like I tend to flip-flop a lot on the matches I want to see most, so who knows, this video might be outdated within a few months. But I've enjoyed making it, and I hope you've enjoyed watching/listening to it as well. Like I said at the start, I plan on trying to review each episode of Season 10 as they release, since I want to try my hand at more videos like this while also trying to be more of an active voice in this community that means so much to me. If what you've seen here makes you interested in that, then feel free to subscribe so you can check my reviews as they come out. Also, leave a comment below of which of these matches you'd like to see as actual Death Battle episodes. In the meantime though, I'm going back to endlessly listening to the definitive version of the Season 10 trailer where everything is synced up to Accidentally in Love. Seriously, if every Death Battle trailer from here on out is not synced to music from the Shrek movies, I will literally cope, seethe, and mauled.